And Red Hat and Dell demonstrate a 100% fully open converged NFV platform for OEMs and customers, integrators, and third-party vendors. So what does it mean to have a fully open and converged NFV platform? I have two gentlemen on our panel today to hopefully tell us that. Chris Wright, Chief Technologist with Red Hat, and also Jeff Baher, Senior Director of NFV Solutions at Dell. And primarily we're talking today about the Dell Red Hat NFV relationship or partnership. And Jeff, I'll start with you. What does it mean for your customers, for your partners, as NFV really gains a lot of momentum for the telcos?
Yeah, so to start, just as you said, this is an opportunity primarily with the communications service providers, telecom, telco, all interchangeable. And fundamentally, this is a shift in their architectures with which they deliver services, mobile services, fixed services. Carriers work over long periods of time, 10, 20-year cycles, and we're now just starting this new cycle of NFV, which is predicated really on an entirely new architecture at the fundamental building blocks of what drives those services. So it's an adoption of new server technologies, storage technologies, and packaged with Red Hat software, virtualization capability to then establish a very open and extensible platform to run a whole slew of services for fixed services, mobile services, enterprise services, consumer services. So a very exciting new time for the carriers.
Chris, NFV gaining momentum in the telco community, what does that mean for your customers, your partners?
Well, it means, first of all, we have an opportunity to bring open source and open platforms to a whole new world. The existing networks for service providers are built out of typically closed, function-specific, hardware-centric solutions. And here we're working together with Dell to transition our end customers to open platform based from open source software that is running most of those same services as software components rather than these fixed purpose hardware functions.
Chris, could you tell us the basic theory behind OpenStack, SDN, or NFV solutions?
Well, OpenStack at its core is cloud infrastructure. So it's really about automation for provisioning of physical resources, storage, network, compute. And SDN is a key component to an NFV solution, where the goal of the NFV solution is to allow the network services to run on top of a cloud platform. And typically, the NFV service is a packet processing service. It needs to sit in the network path in a very prescribed position. And a way to facilitate and orchestrate the end-to-end connectivity is with an SDN controller to steer traffic through the series of services that are part of the network.
Jeff, what does it mean to you to have a fully open and converged NFV platform?
The biggest thing is what it means to our customers, and that's ultimately it's about flexibility and choice. And building off of what Chris said, the architectures and the technologies that were governing many of these service providers up until now have been closed. And what that ultimately means is that the network, the infrastructure is really closed off from a rate of innovation that is critical for them to maintain their competitive capabilities in the market. So it is an opportunity to enter a new market from Dell's perspective, but it's also the ability to introduce a whole new capability, technologies to our customer set that needs it to remain competitive.
Chris, I want you to take us back a couple of years and tell us what it was like transitioning from an open, or a proprietary rather, networking platform to really an open standards-based platform.
Well, there's a couple of key elements in there. One is when you have a technology transition, there's a concern about skill sets. So we need to help our partners and customers learn the skills to operate these new technologies. The other piece is just perfectly stated by Jeff, the flexibility that comes with this new platform improves the rate of innovation. And so if you look back a few years ago, or even if you flash back to the sort of vertically integrated RISC Unix environment to a more modern x86 and Linux environment, the proliferation of interoperable solutions when you're building from a common platform is really unparalleled. So we're giving those building blocks and that that foundation and tool set to the network operators. It's exciting from a business opportunity point of view for us, and it's really critical to the long-term business plan for the CSPs.
So Jeff, how do you, well, there may be a perception that data centers or servers rather are a commodity of sorts, right? But certainly a very complex architecture exists amongst hundreds of data centers within a data center, or hundreds of servers rather within a data center. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think this is it's an interesting aspect to what's happening with NFV. Clearly, we're talking about software and virtualization with the assumption that that's all now moving from proprietary ASIC-based systems to standard x86 architectures or servers. And I think to some extent, the server is almost considered an afterthought today, that there's so much focus on the software, the different flavors of VNFs, the different virtualization capabilities, that there's the assumption this will run on a server and they'll figure that out later. What we found, having built some of the largest cloud infrastructures, public cloud infrastructures, large enterprise data centers, it's a lot more than just the server at its atomic unit. And we're talking now about deployments of tens or hundreds of thousands of servers. So it becomes more of a discussion of large scale or hyperscale data center design, energy efficiency. The backdrop, of course, is the adoption of a significant amount of servers and storage and networking. But ultimately, how that comes together at the scale that the carriers need is a significant expertise that Dell brings to the table.
Chris, I want to ask you about access to the open source community. Let's say outside of an event like OPNFV, how do you gain direct access to this open source community?
Well, on the one hand, it's really simple. You just show up. Now, that's easier said than done, right? So there's a language, a common language you need to develop to speak together. There's some base understanding of each other's perspective, but the open source projects are by nature very open and welcoming. We're always looking for new inputs. One of the exciting things about working with the telco community is we're bringing on a whole new set of requirements that we haven't had to deal with in many of these open source projects. When we take on new requirements, bringing diversity into a project tends to fundamentally improve the underlying architecture of the project. You need to mold yourself to adapt to new use cases. One mechanism is sort of bolted onto the side, a piece of functionality, and that's never going to be very sustainable. To really refactor the underlying open source code base to take on these new use cases is what makes the projects sustain for the long term. So we're open, we're welcoming, and you just need to come and show up.
Jeff, regarding NFV, have we stepped out with both feet from the vendor lock-in reality and into the open source really approach?
Well, I think that's what needs to happen. So whether or not we have, one step, two steps, it's proven that with open standards and open source, that was how you'll realize the maximum rate of innovation. And that, many would believe, is what's been holding back some of the carriers up until now. So I think this is, it's an exciting time because we're talking about new architectures that are ushering in a whole new set of technologies. And with that, a new relationship to how the carriers will ultimately relate to the technologies that they're investing in. And open source, open standards is an expression of how that relationship is changing. So certainly different than the world that they've come from, and I think critical for them to maintain their competitiveness moving forward.
Well, one important thing to note in the specific relationship between Dell and Red Hat, we have a commitment to the open source projects and the open source development model and upstream development. Just because something is built out of open source components doesn't mean it's definitively open. You could create sort of localized changes and deliver that to your customer in a way that would actually look a lot like a proprietary solution and still maintain some of that vendor lock-in. So we're really committed to working together with truly open components so that we're doing the innovation in the upstream projects, delivering that to our joint customers, and providing them the flexibility that they're looking for with the confidence that we can deliver something that will bring them back as returning customers.
We appreciate you guys bringing this to the forefront and talking about it at an event like this at OPNFV. Chris, thanks for your time. I know you've had a busy last few weeks, traveling back and forth. And Jeff, it was good to meet you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.